When Moira Walker, one of the founders of what was originally Dorset Action on Abuse, when she and I moved from Leicester to Dorset in the year 2000, we brought with us the experience of having set up and worked in a counselling centre which had a huge number of counsellors, mainly recruited from courses that we taught at the University of Leicester, and a counselling centre which was able to bring counselling and psychotherapy to a large number of people at very low cost. But Moira had a further string to her bow, which was a passionate concern for adult survivors of childhood abuse. She had taught courses on how to work with survivors in therapy, and she had published a book in 1992 called Surviving Secrets, which had been shortlisted for the Mind Book of the Year. Dorset was not Leicester. With the exception of one or two small counselling projects, there was in that year, 2000, virtually no access to low-cost counselling and psychotherapy, especially of the person-centred or psychodynamic type, except through a few private practitioners who not unnaturally charged for their services. There was no tradition, which there had grown to be in Leicester, of those in private practice giving some of their time pro bono to the work of a volunteer counselling centre. So Moira, together with a small number of women whom she'd had got to know and who shared her vision, set about starting a service for survivors of abuse. And just as the Leicester Project in its early days, they too started with the help of a church providing premises for them. And from there, they built up the practice and eventually got to a point where they could bid for a lottery grant to set up in their own premises. They recruited counsellors, mainly from the increasing number of people training on counselling courses in Bournemouth and Poole. And in a remarkable achievement, they got funding for the first tranche of 5 years, and then for a further lottery grant to be renewed for a further 5 years. Moira first became ill in 2009, and it became difficult because of the intense treatment that she had to go through to put her usual energy into DAA. Thankfully, others who had been part of the original team took on that mantle, and although she was able to inject some of her enthusiasm into DAA again, as she gained strength in 2011 and 12, her cancer returned and she died in 2013. And I remember saying at the annual general meeting that year that DAA did not have to depend upon Moira being alive. It had acquired a life of its own. It was providing already a fantastic service to women and men who sought help. And for a few years it has continued to offer that essential service to people in Dorset. Most importantly, of course, to clients, but also to those who came as novice counsellors to train through working with DAA and bringing their deeply caring concern and honing their professional skills and doing a wonderful job. There will be many clients and many counsellors who have so much to be grateful for through what DAA was able to offer. And it was not for want of enthusiasm and commitment that DAA began to find it more and more difficult to keep going to provide such a good service. An attempt to boost its appeal led to changing the name to From Hurting to Healing. But there were essentially two factors which I think made it very hard to maintain its viability. Two factors which I have seen elsewhere, and they are so different from what I was aware of when I first started as a therapist 50 years ago and when I helped to found the counselling service in Leicester. And they have contributed, these two factors, to the impossibility of continuing. The first is the almost complete failure of the statutory services, especially the National Health Service, to recognise that in volunteer counselling services there is a resource which for a relatively small amount of funding can provide 10 times more first-class therapy and counselling to a particular area than the NHS can. And the second feature is the decline, of course, of counselling courses in universities, as well as the increasing demands of professional associations that volunteer counsellors must be paid. And that makes it so difficult to recruit the very people who have made counselling centres such a success in the past. Not unnaturally, then, I contrast the experience that Moira and I had in Leicester in the 1980s and the 1990s, where the spirit of working without payment to help those who are in distress, as well as the provision of courses that provided a huge pool of trainees and qualified counsellors, as well as people of other backgrounds working behind the scenes, all this has made it much more difficult in Dorset. But none of what I have just said can detract at all from everything that DAA, from hurting to healing, has achieved over many years. It is incredibly sad that it cannot continue, and yet, as in any time of mourning, what has been achieved must never be forgotten, because it lives on still in all those who have been touched by such a valued and committed service.
It is with a mixture of sadness and immense pride that I make this short video today at a time of closure of the service which began as Dorset Action on Abuse and evolved to Hurting to Healing. I became involved with Dorset Action on Abuse after meeting Dr. Moira Walker and her team, and admiring and respecting their commitment and professionalism in addressing a gap in our society which dealt with childhood abuse and ensuing trauma into adulthood. I have been honoured to be a patron and watch the team, sustained by Zoe Poole, survive the loss of Moira and continue to offer support to many in need. The burden of governance, training, sustained counsellors and the rise of public service has meant that Hurting to Healing has closed its doors. This decision was not made lightly, but with recognition of the difficulty of maintaining a volunteer service with no sustained income stream and the comfort of the knowledge that a public service is now available to those who continue to need support. This is not a time to grieve, but a time to remember all those who have received help and support from the commitment and dedication of the small team that has been DAA and H2H for many years. A Queen's Award paid testament to this, and I take this opportunity to say thank you to you all. You have much to be proud of and leave a legacy of caring that many will never forget. The effort expended has been enormous, and even now continues to be so by the few who are H2H and are completing the closure with the usual professionalism that is the charity. Well done to each and every one of you, and most of all from everyone over the years for whom you have always been there. Thank you.